He never imagined that a single yes could change his entire life. Ethan was just a poor college student, hungry, exhausted, and one step away from giving up on his dreams. But when a mysterious 71-year-old millionaire woman walked into the small cafe where he worked, his life took a turn no one could explain. People laughed when they heard he married her. They called him a gold digger, a fool, a boy chasing fortune. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't see the tears in her eyes when she said, "I don't have much time left. But I want to feel loved one last time." 7 days later, Ethan found himself standing in front of her grave, holding a letter that would shatter his heart and reveal the most beautiful secret of all. Because inside that letter were the answers he never expected, truths about love, forgiveness, and a bond that went beyond life itself. What he discovered would not only change how he saw her, but how he saw himself. So before you judge him, listen to his story. A story of a poor student who married a dying millionaire woman, and found a love that money could never buy. Because sometimes, fate brings two broken souls together, not to stay forever, but to heal what life has broken. Ethan Miller was 24, a final-year architecture student barely surviving on instant noodles and sleepless nights. His father had passed away years ago, and his mother's medical bills were piling higher than his textbooks. Every day felt like a war between survival and dreams. He worked part-time at a small cafe near campus, serving customers while secretly sketching buildings on napkins between orders. One rainy evening, a woman walked in, elegant, graceful, and out of place in such a humble cafe. Her silver hair was tied neatly in a bun, her clothes refined but simple. She ordered a cappuccino and sat by the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. Ethan noticed her trembling hand as she reached for her cup. He quietly brought her an extra napkin and said, "Careful, ma'am, it's hot." She smiled gently, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you, young man. You have kind eyes. Remind me of someone I once knew." Her name was Margaret Linton, a 71-year-old retired businesswoman who once owned one of the city's most respected interior design firms. Despite her wealth, there was sadness in her eyes, a loneliness that even money couldn't hide. Days turned into weeks, and Margaret kept returning to the cafe. She and Ethan began talking about life, art, and dreams. She admired his passion, he admired her wisdom. She became his silent mentor, and perhaps, the only person who truly listened to him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Margaret looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Ethan," she said softly, "if I asked you to marry me, would you think I've lost my mind?" The cup in his hand nearly slipped. "Marry you?" he whispered, stunned. She nodded. "I know what people will say. That I'm old, foolish, and lonely. But I've lived my life surrounded by money and emptiness. I don't need wealth anymore, I need peace. Someone to share my last days with. Someone sincere." Ethan froze. He thought of his debts, his mother's medicine, his future slipping away. He wasn't heartless, he knew what this would look like to the world. But something in her voice felt genuine. She wasn't buying love, she was begging for companionship. That night, he couldn't sleep. Her words echoed in his mind. By morning, he made his decision. When he arrived at her mansion the next day, she greeted him with that same gentle smile. "You came back," she said. "Yes," Ethan replied quietly. "I'll marry you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then let's give life one more reason to smile." Their wedding was small, just two souls standing against a world that would never understand them. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, he didn't know what destiny had planned for him. All he knew was that this moment, strange, unbelievable, and fragile, felt real. And sometimes, that's all a broken heart needs to begin again. The first morning after their quiet wedding, Ethan woke to the smell of fresh lavender and the soft melody of piano music echoing through the mansion. He followed the sound to the drawing room, where Margaret sat in a white gown, her fragile fingers gliding over the keys. She smiled when she saw him, a warm, tired smile that carried years of stories. "Good morning, husband," she said playfully, her voice trembling with both humor and weakness. Ethan chuckled. "Good morning, wife. I didn't know you played so beautifully." "It's been years," she whispered. "But when you're surrounded by silence long enough, even music feels like company." The house was enormous, walls covered in oil paintings, halls echoing with footsteps, air heavy with memories. Yet despite the luxury, Ethan felt something hollow there, something missing. There were no servants, no laughter, no family portraits. Only Margaret and her quiet world. As days passed, Ethan began noticing things. the way she often lost her breath while climbing stairs, how she'd hide a cough behind her napkin, how her hands trembled as she held her tea. He grew worried. One night, as thunder rolled outside, Margaret suddenly began coughing violently. Ethan rushed to her room, finding her pale and gasping. Panic surged through him. He called the family doctor immediately. The doctor's words cut through the silence like a knife. "Her lungs are failing. It's advanced. She doesn't have long." Ethan felt the ground disappear beneath him. "She didn't tell me," he murmured. The doctor sighed. "She refused treatment months ago. Said she wanted to live what little life she had left on her own terms." When Margaret awoke, Ethan sat beside her, his eyes red. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. She smiled weakly. "Because I didn't marry you to make you watch me die. I married you so I wouldn't die feeling forgotten." Her words shattered him. She wasn't looking for pity, she was looking for meaning. From that day on, Ethan devoted himself to her. He cooked for her, made her laugh, and filled the mansion with music and life again. They watched sunsets from the balcony, talked about dreams they'd never chase, and read poetry late into the night. For the first time, Ethan realized, love wasn't about years, looks, or status. It was about connection. About two souls meeting at the right time, even if for a brief moment. On the sixth night, Margaret sat with him under the garden's lanterns. The air smelled of roses. She reached for his hand and said, "You've given me more happiness in a week than I've felt in decades. Promise me one thing, Ethan, that you'll live. Really live." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I promise." The next morning, their seventh day, she was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan found her sitting by the window, her favorite tea untouched, a soft smile frozen on her lips. A sealed envelope rested beside her hand with his name written in neat cursive, "To my dearest Ethan." His heart stopped. He called her name again and again, but she was gone, her body still, her face peaceful. Ethan fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The mansion that once felt lonely now felt unbearable. In just 7 days, she had changed his entire life, and now, she had left him alone in the silence she once endured. He picked up the letter, holding it to his chest, afraid to open it. Whatever was inside, he knew it would break him. And maybe, save him at the same time. The rain poured endlessly that night, like the sky itself was mourning her loss. Ethan sat alone in the silent mansion, his trembling hands clutching the sealed envelope Margaret had left behind. The same woman the world mocked him for marrying, the woman who, in just 7 days, had changed everything he believed about love and life, was gone. He stared at the letter for hours, unable to open it. His chest ached with a kind of pain he'd never known, not the pain of loss alone, but the pain of realizing he had truly loved her. Finally, as dawn broke through the heavy clouds, he tore open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, her neat cursive still strong despite her frailty. "My dearest Ethan. If you're reading this, then I've gone where pain no longer follows. I know you're crying, please don't. I didn't want our story to end with grief, but with gratitude. Ethan, when I met you, I was dying long before my illness. My days were quiet, my nights were lonelier. I had wealth, but no warmth. Then you smiled at me, not as a rich woman, but as a human being. You gave me something no doctor or fortune could, peace. You see, I once had a son. His name was also Ethan. I lost him 30 years ago in an accident. When you walked into my life, I saw him again, not in your face, but in your kindness, in your fire, in your dreams. I wanted to help you, but not by charity, by love. That's why I asked you to marry me. Not to own you, but to remind myself that I could still give, still feel." Ethan's tears blurred the words. His heart twisted in pain and awe. She hadn't married him for companionship alone, she had married him because he reminded her of the child she lost. He continued reading. "I leave you my house, my savings, and most importantly, the scholarship fund I've named after you, the Ethan Linton Foundation. It will support young dreamers like you who have the heart but not the means to reach for the stars. Promise me, Ethan, that you'll continue your studies. Build something beautiful. Build a life that would make you proud, and me too. Remember, love is not about how long it lasts. It's about how deeply it changes us. Thank you for changing me. With eternal love. Margaret Linton." By the time he finished reading, the sun had risen completely, golden light spilling into the mansion, touching every corner that once felt dark. Ethan pressed the letter to his heart and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Margaret." I promise." He spent the next months completing his degree, funded by the inheritance she left him. But he didn't spend lavishly, he lived simply, dedicating everything to honoring her wish. Years later, Ethan became one of the city's most respected architects. He built homes for the poor, schools for orphans, and shelters for widows. Every building he designed bore a small silver plaque near the entrance that read, "In memory of Margaret Linton, the woman who proved that love has no age, and kindness never dies." Whenever journalists asked about his success, he never mentioned the money. He only said one thing: "She taught me that sometimes, the shortest love stories leave the longest impact." One evening, after receiving an award for social architecture, Ethan returned to the same cafe where it all began. He sat by the window, ordered a cappuccino, and watched the rain, just as she used to. For a moment, he swore he could feel her presence beside him, smiling, proud. He whispered softly, "You kept your promise, Margaret. You gave me your life worth living." Outside, the rain slowed, and a faint beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, like her final blessing. He thought he was marrying her to escape poverty. But she married him to give him purpose. In just 7 days, she taught him that love doesn't count the years, it counts the moments that change our hearts forever.